maybe you need to explain it succinctly for people one last time. When Trump talks of the deep state, um, and wanting to get rid of it, what is he really talking about? And why does he hate these bureaucrats so much?
Well, every U.S. government agency, whether it's the Department of Defense, the Department of Transportation, parastate organizations like the USPS will have some federal employees in it. The Foreign Service at the State Department, for instance, the people who work at embassies, who work at consulates, who represent the United States internationally, all of those are federal bureaucrats. The people administering Pell Grants or Medicare or Medicaid, the people buying aircraft carriers from the private sector, because of course, even defense has been largely privatized. Um, those are all members of the federal workforce. Indeed, every uniformed officer serving, officer or soldier, seaman, airman, is it still men at the end of all of these?
Sea person.
Like, yeah. In any case, all military personnel are also part of the federal workforce, and that's the organization through which any kind of political, any state authority or state function operates. It's composed of people, and the individuals may not matter and can be easily replaced, but as a class, well, even at the individual level, there are the place of these white collar workers, essentially. Um, the influence that they have has allowed them to protect themselves through unionization. The federal public sector unions are one of the few ones remaining. And through successive acts of Congress, the process by which that bureaucracy is staffed, their career progression, has all been regularized, standardized, and laid out. Now, over time, the civil service attracted a certain type of person, one which skewed more and more democratic in general. This varies agency by agency. For instance, DHS is generally very reactionary, but for instance, the Department of Education, the State Department, I'm not saying that they're leftists, but a lot of them are liberals. And there's also a collective esprit among civil servants. The very term, very word civil servant, distinguishes them from regular office workers. And there are all of these ritualized commitments, oaths to the Constitution, that kind of thing, because you should be working for the interests of the nation state. So all of that resulted in a class of people, ones that were essential for the exercise of state power, working, not sharing the agenda of the president, who's nominally their boss. And when you look at it from that kind of perspective, in his first term, it was basically partly a labor action that derailed some of his plans. Some of it was personnel at the top, some of it was personnel across entire agencies, but you did have slow walking and anxiety about fulfilling his orders, right? Whether it was things like the Muslim ban, which also attracted legal action, but often by other PMC bureaucracies, sometimes state level governments. Now that Trump understands how a bureaucracy works and what the importance is of having cadres in all the right places, he's going after this entire class of federal employees, stripping them of job protections. There's going to be entire units and programs have been cut. attempts at, including in ways that are designed to stop the flow of money to people outside of the government through the form of grants or aid. So that entire structure, the state apparatus, it's not spies. It's not just cloak and dagger supporting Israel, Mossad, CIA type stuff. The entire organization that supports the federal government governing is on the block and ripe for reengineering. That's the promise of the second Trump term.
How do you personally feel about that?
I'm very desensitized at this point. Like,
Oof.
I'm one of those guys who have seen way too many horror movies, so I can just sit through like some Saw style splatter gore and be like, that I don't think a femur breaks like that. And so, objectively, this is terrible. This is very, very bad. The people who, ideologically, when you manage to establish a pipeline of personnel that are committed to your program into the government apparatus, well, now the entire power of the state is at the disposal of somebody who doesn't share your vision for the future, and somebody who may have interests that are deeply contrary to yours. There's no more bricks on this thing, right? There's no humanizing influence. The most dangerous periods, the most extreme periods in authoritarian countries, the Third Reich and Soviet Russia included, was when the party state had finally succeeded in removing all of the old bureaucrats and replacing them with the most committed ideologues. That's when you can really use state power to do crazy things. To a certain extent, what came before was a little bit of kabuki, where from the 70s onwards, or following the notion, the feeling of unity and solidarity of national mission provided by World War II and the Cold War, that helped solidify a particular kind of truce between political factions, where the state apparatus, although it needed to be, McCarthyism got rid of actual leftists, but what was permitted, what stayed behind, was this ideological space, which included center left and center right forms of American liberalism, and a willingness to play by rules, drawn up by this nominally neutral cadre of people whose loyalty is not to political parties or to particular leaders, but to the state as a whole. And that politicization, that offered a certain kind of a resistance to political ideology and political programs that were beyond the pale. Then that began to break down, I think, in the 90s. But at this point, what started out as a leftward drift among people, basically college-educated Americans, that developed a certain respectability around the values of tolerance, multiculturalism, these kinds of things. The people who, made the world safe for wine moms. Now they're being replaced by Trump loyalists who are young.
Yeah.
That should be scary, right? Because the previous guys weren't harmless, but these guys are definitely harmful.
Mhm.